Nobody tells you the 9 benefits of living alone after 70. They only ever talk about the loneliness. My name is Louise. I'm 90 years old, and for 15 years, ever since my husband passed, I have lived completely, entirely on my own. My children worried I wouldn't cope. My friends pitied me. Strangers assumed something had gone wrong with my life. They talked about living alone the way you talk about a wound that hasn't healed yet. But here is what no one ever told me. What no article, no doctor, no well-meaning family member ever said. Living alone after 70 comes with 9 surprising gifts, not burdens, not consolation prizes. 9 real gifts I never once had in 68 years of marriage. If you've been told that living alone is something to survive, I want to show you today that it might be something worth choosing. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share changes everything. Are you living alone right now? Type 1 if you are, or 0 if you're not. I'd love to know who's in this room with me. I want to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone. The first year after my husband Richard passed, I was terrified of my own house, not of intruders, not of the dark. I was terrified of the quiet. Some evenings I'd sit in the living room with the television on full volume, not watching it, just needing the noise, needing something in the room that sounded like another person. I'd leave lights on in rooms I wasn't using. I'd schedule phone calls I didn't want to have, just to fill the hours. I was performing okay for an audience that wasn't even there. That went on for almost a year. And then one evening the television broke, just stopped. And I sat in the silence expecting to fall apart. I didn't. Something else happened instead, and that's when I began to understand the first gift. Benefit number 1, living your own rhythm. For 68 years, my time was never fully mine. Meals were at certain hours because Richard was hungry. Mornings started early because the children needed school. Weekends were shaped around everyone else's plans. I'm not saying that was wrong. I chose that life and I loved it. But I hadn't noticed, until it stopped, how long I'd been living on everyone else's clock. Now I wake when I wake. I eat when I'm hungry. If I want to read until 2 in the morning, no one sighs. If I want to skip lunch and have a bowl of soup at 4 in the afternoon, that's exactly what I do. There's no negotiating, no adjusting, no quietly swallowing what you wanted because someone else needed something different. Let me tell you about someone I know, a woman named Dorothy. She woke at 6 in the morning every single day for 43 years, not because her body wanted to, because her husband did. When he passed, her daughter told her, "Mom, you can sleep in now." Dorothy told me she cried, not from grief, from the sudden realization that she didn't even know what time her own body wanted to wake up. She had to relearn herself from scratch. That's not a small thing. That's not just a schedule. That's your life, lived on borrowed time. When you start living your own rhythm, truly your own, you begin to remember who you were before you became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caretaker. That person is still there. She was just waiting for a little quiet to come back. And that brings me to the second gift, benefit number 2, the gift of real silence. We were taught, most of us, that a quiet house is a lonely house. That silence means something is missing, so we fill it with television, with phone calls, with busyness, with guests. Anything to prove the house is alive. But I want to tell you about something that happened to me. A friend I know, a woman named Helen, told me about the first time she sat alone in her kitchen for 20 minutes and did absolutely nothing. No phone, no television, no task. She said she started crying and didn't know why. I told her, because you finally stopped moving long enough to feel what was actually there. That's what silence does. It doesn't empty you out. It shows you what's already inside. For me, silence became the place where I remembered things, old memories I hadn't visited in years. A summer afternoon when my children were small, the smell of my mother's kitchen, feelings I'd been too busy to notice. In silence, I started to actually inhabit my own life instead of just moving through it. Silence isn't emptiness. It's the first honest conversation you'll have with yourself in years. Now let's talk about something that surprised me even more: the walls of the home you live in and what they have to do with who you are. The year I turned 78, I painted my bedroom yellow. Not soft yellow, not tasteful yellow, bright, loud, almost aggressive yellow, the color of sunflowers in full July sun. My late husband, Richard, would have hated it. He was a navy blue and beige kind of man, and for decades our home looked exactly like that. Quiet, neutral, safe. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I didn't even notice I'd been compromising until the day I walked into a paint store, stood in front of 200 color swatches, and realized no one is coming home to have an opinion about this. The choice is entirely mine. Benefit number 3, control over your own space. Let me tell you about someone I know. For 40 years, she wanted to hang a large painting in her hallway. Bold colors, slightly abstract, the kind of thing that made her feel something when she looked at it. Her husband thought it was too loud, so it stayed in the closet. 2 years after he passed, she hung it. She called me the evening she did it. She was laughing, not because it was funny, because she finally felt, she said, like the house was hers. I know what you're thinking. It's just furniture. It's just paint. But it isn't really. The space you live in reflects something about who you are. When you have full control over it, when nothing in your home requires negotiation or compromise, you start to understand yourself in a way that's very quiet and very real. Your space becomes a mirror, and for the first time in a long time, you might actually like what you see. Benefit number 4, the freedom to stop performing. There's a kind of exhaustion that no one talks about, the exhaustion of always being watched, not watched by strangers, watched by the people who love you. When you live with others, there are unspoken rules about how you're supposed to appear: capable, cheerful, holding it together. Even grief has a shape that's acceptable and a shape that makes people uncomfortable. I remember the first time I cried alone in this house, truly alone, with no one in the next room. I didn't cry quietly. I didn't stop after a few minutes. I cried for an hour, and no one knocked on the door to check on me or hand me a tissue with that particular look that means, "Please stop now." When I was done, I felt clean, emptied out in the good way. With others, you perform. Alone, you exist. That's not a small distinction. That's the difference between a life that is lived and a life that is managed. Benefit number 5, relationships that actually mean something. Here's something people get wrong about living alone. They assume it means seeing fewer people, and that fewer people means more loneliness. I want to push back on that gently but firmly. Let me tell you about someone I know, a woman whose daughter used to visit every Sunday. Not because they were especially close, because it was Sunday. It was habit. It was obligation in a cardigan. When circumstances changed and the visits became less frequent, something unexpected happened. The visits that remained meant more. They planned them. They looked forward to them. They were actually present when they happened. I know what you're thinking, but what about family? Don't they feel pushed away? No. What I've found is that when you stop being available out of need, the people who show up are showing up because they want to. And that changes everything about how the time feels. You can't truly connect with someone you feel obligated to see. Choice is where real love begins. Are you finding that your relationships have changed since living alone? Better or worse? Type 1 for better, 0 for worse. I'm genuinely curious. I want to tell you about the day I learned to use a power drill. I was 77 years old. A shelf in my kitchen had come loose from the wall, and I stood there looking at it for about a week, waiting for someone to come and fix it. Then I realized no one was coming, and I could either wait indefinitely or learn something new. I drove to the hardware store, asked a young man who looked barely older than my grandchildren to show me what I needed, came home, watched 2 videos on my telephone, and put that shelf back on the wall myself. My hands shook a little. The first hole went slightly crooked. I didn't care. I stood back and looked at it and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Benefit number 6, a confidence that's genuinely yours. Let me tell you about someone I know, a woman who had never paid a household bill on her own in 50 years of marriage. Her husband handled all of it. When he passed, she sat down with the first stack of envelopes and felt completely lost. She called me after she'd sorted through them the first time. She wasn't crying from fear. She was crying because she'd done it herself and hadn't known she could. That's a very specific kind of pride that no one can give you and no one can take away. You build it quietly, problem by problem, one thing at a time. Every challenge you solve alone adds one more quiet layer of, I can do this. And at 70, at 80, at 90, that accumulation matters enormously. Benefit number 7, small joys and no one to apologize to for having them. You know those things you always meant to do, but kept putting off, not big things, just quiet little pleasures that somehow never fit into the schedule? I started baking bread at 11 o'clock at night. Not because I needed bread, because I wanted to, because I liked the smell of it and the rhythm of it, and the fact that at 11 at night there was no one waiting for me to do anything else. I started keeping a journal. I spent entire afternoons in my garden doing nothing more productive than watching the birds. Let me tell you about someone I know. She picked up painting at 74. Her late husband would have called it a silly hobby. She sold her third piece at 78 and donated the money to a local school. She told me afterward, I spent 40 years being practical. These last few years have been the most alive I've ever felt. Joy doesn't need permission, it just needs space. And living alone gives you that space in abundance. Benefit number 8, creativity comes back. This one surprised me more than any other. I had always thought of myself as a practical person, not a creative one. But creativity needs 2 things that are almost impossible to find when you're living for others: time and permission to fail without an audience. When you live alone, you can try things badly. You can write a terrible poem and throw it away. You can attempt a recipe that turns into something inedible and laugh at yourself without explaining the laugh. You can start a project, abandon it, start again differently, and no one tracks the process or questions the detour. We were so busy living for others that we forgot we had an entire inner world waiting. That world doesn't expire. It just gets quieter the longer you ignore it. Living alone turns the volume back up. Now, of all 9 things I've discovered in these 15 years, the last one took me the longest to understand, and I think it might be the most important thing I could ever say to you. Let me say something that took me years to understand. Loneliness is not about how many people are around you. I know that now with absolute certainty because I learned it the hard way. Benefit number 9, understanding the difference between being alone and being lonely. The loneliest I have ever felt in my adult life was not in this house, living by myself. It was the Christmas 2 years after Richard passed, when the whole family came to stay. The house was full. There were grandchildren running through the hallways and conversations happening in every room and food on every surface. And I sat in the middle of all of it and felt completely invisible, like I was a piece of furniture that people moved around but didn't quite see. That was loneliness. Real loneliness. It had nothing to do with whether anyone was physically present. Let me tell you about someone I know. She moved into assisted living at 79 because she said she didn't want to be alone. 6 months later, she called me. She told me, "Catherine, I've never felt more invisible in my life." She was surrounded by people every hour of the day. She had never been lonelier. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of yourself. When you live alone, something gradually shifts. You start to know what you actually think about things, not what you think you're supposed to think, not the opinion that keeps the peace at dinner, but your real response to the world. You know what makes you genuinely happy and what only ever made other people comfortable. You know when you need company and when you need solitude, and you stop confusing the two. I am alone in this house most hours of most days, and I am not lonely, because I know who is here. I am here, fully, for perhaps the first time in my life, and that is worth more than I can put into words. I think about the woman I was in that first year, sitting in a dark living room with the television on, performing okay for a house that wasn't even watching. I wish I could go back and sit beside her and tell her, "Stop filling the silence. It isn't your enemy. Give it a little time. It's about to become your closest friend." If you're in that first year right now, or the second or the fifth, I want you to know that what feels like emptiness may be clearing. It may be making room, not for more noise, not for more busyness, but for you. I hope you have a morning this week where you make your coffee exactly the way you like it, where you sit in whatever chair you choose, where no one needs anything from you for at least one quiet hour. And I hope in that hour you catch a glimpse of someone you haven't seen in a while, yourself. Living alone is not a problem to be fixed. For many of us, after 70, it is the answer we didn't know we needed. You are not alone because no one chose you. You are alone because you finally chose yourself. If this conversation meant something to you, I would be so grateful if you stayed. There is more where this came from. And if someone you love needs to hear this today, share it with them. That is the kindest thing you can do. One last question before you go. Do you see living alone as a gift or a burden? Type 1 for gift, 0 for burden. I'll read every single one.